Great here. Hey, I want to welcome everybody. Looks like lots of people are logging on. Delighted to have you here for the Visionary New Thing webinar. We're going to be talking church design trends. We have with us an expert in Dave Milam. He's going to talk to us some about which trends really matter, which ones we ought to ignore. And I'll tell you what, we do have a Q&A function there where you can just drop stuff into the chat. And if you have questions you'd like to ask us, Dave and I were talking just before we jumped on here, and we feel like your agenda is more important than ours. So if there's things you'd like to talk about regarding church design and trends, we would love to hear from you. So go ahead and just drop something in the chat, and we'll do our very best to try to accommodate you. Excuse me. Let me introduce Dave. Dave is the Vice President of Strategic Design for Visionary Studios. And what he does is he works alongside church leaders and really tries to help them kind of take their space from where they are to where they want to be, and has been doing that for quite some time and comes to us with a lot of expertise. So I'll tell you what, Dave, why don't you start while I try to keep from coughing? If you could, just give us a little bit about Visionary Studios, because that's kind of home base for you, what you guys
Yeah,
do, and then I'll talk a little about New Thing, then we'll jump into our topic.
yeah. What's interesting is I spent about 20 years in the vocational ministry. Was actually a church planter in Charlotte. Worked with NewThing a little bit there while I was a church planter, and had a friend of mine named Carl George come to me and say, "Hey, really, it's time for you to stop doing what you can do and start doing what you should do." And what he saw in me was design. So a year and a half later, after the prophet Carl spoke, I end up at Visionary Studios, and our team actually is a design build firm, and we work with literally hundreds of churches a year. And some of them we're building, 3,500 seat auditoriums actually still. And then others, it's like, listen, we've got our kids' check-in area that's just not doing great. And what's super cool about what I get to do is I see kind of the bubbles of what starts to happen. Like I see what people across the nation start asking me and can identify trends that are starting to happen. And I see things that are starting to fade as well.
Yeah,
And it's really interesting because I feel like that information needs to be shared somewhere, you know?
we can.
So that's really what we do. We're helping churches. Like I'm the guy on the front end, kind of helping, trying to figure out what needs to happen and is it budget and what's the best strategic way to knock this out.
And I think one of the things that's unique about you is because you do come from a church planting background, you understand kind of like the practitioner side, the pastor side, what that is,
Yeah,
but then you're also an expert on the facilities piece, and to bring both those together in thought leadership is a pretty unique combination, and it's kind of your sweet spot.
yeah, and David, I don't know if I told you this, but when we planted, we were portable for 10 years, and I'm convinced that if I actually knew how to do it, I would have been portable for a less amount of time. Really, like they didn't teach this in seminary, so I had no clue how to crack the code on getting in a building for the first time or doing a project. I had no idea. And church planters all we didn't necessarily talk about that. So it's really great to finally have in my brain crack the code on how to do this and get to share it.
That's cool. So Dave comes to you from Visionarian. I'm come to you wearing my New Thing hat, and at New Thing, one of the things we love to do is we just want to help reproduce both disciples, leaders, churches, networks, and movements, and do that however we can. And if we can help come alongside you, both as either as a leader or a pastor, we would love to be able to do that. So I'll tell you, let's jump into our topic here. And again, it we got about 25 people or so on here. If you have questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. We'd love to talk about some of those things even as we're talking. I have a number of things I want to ask Dave about. And here's where I'd like to start. We just came from Exponential. And at the conference there, like 5,500 folks. And I heard that during your pre-conference session last week, there was some really great content. Unfortunately, I was not in there, but I did hear it was some really great content. Could you go back and share again, just some of the things, some of the highlights from that pre-conference?
Yeah, I, being in this industry, I get to notice a little bit how architects work and how the whole process works. And um, in my mind, I think architects act a whole lot like a waiter at a restaurant. You know, I I've never. This actually might be a great business plan. We can maybe do this, but. I've never in my life been to a restaurant where the waiter walks up to the table and she says, "Hey, before we order, let me know what your budget is. What number do we need to stay under for this meal?" You know, like it's never happened. It probably never
Oh,
will happen. It's just how it goes because the waiter gets paid more the more I order. If I order dessert, if I order a glass of wine, whatever it is, you know, they make more money, which I think is the way it should be, right? Oh, I'm going to admit someone in the waiting room. Perfect. And is exactly how it should be. Well, architects, believe it or not, kind of get paid the same way. They get a percentage off of the cost of how much construction is. So a lot of times architects will walk up to you and say, "All right, you want a building? How many seats? Like, what do you want?" And then they start taking the order almost like a waiter or waitress takes it at the restaurant. And then the biggest challenge is you get the bill at the end. Visionary is very, very different because we are that strange restaurant that comes to you and says, before we start anything, what's your budget here? And what I do know is when churches tell us that their budget is, let's say $4 million, what they really mean is it's three, and they've got an extra faith for another $1 million, you know. So if it goes over, it's trouble. And the challenging thing is pastors all the time feel like they need to stretch way beyond where they are in order to do ministry. And what happens is they end up really flexing way further than they should, and they end up sacrificing ministry because of what they're doing. So they overspend.
that okay, that feels like one of those situations, like that they talk about like your staff handbook is usually a result of mistakes you've made in the past.
It's
That
true. It's true.
sounds like I would love to is there a story behind that? I mean, how did you get to that place? There's gotta be a story behind that.
Oh my gosh. Dave, are you really asking me
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just, when Visionary started over 20 years ago, we were started with a bunch of dreamers and people who loved Disney. And so immediately we started as this master planning firm. And we brought Disney creativity to church plans. And for 15 years, we overdrew. We drew plans that every church leader would go, "Oh my goodness, that's amazing! Look at this!" And then they would say, "How much does that cost?"
Uh,
And I don't know how many churches I had been to where I saw our plans sitting in the closet, not done. And they spent $30,000, $40,000 on these plans. And there was a season in Visioneering where we were known as the guys who drew amazing things but couldn't get it done because it was too expensive. So there was a come to Jesus meeting probably about 7 years ago where we said, "Listen, we've been doing this for a long time. We're super creative. Our team is super creative, but somehow we got to figure out how to draw to a budget." And that kind of became a stake in the ground. And we determined we can draw creative, but if it's not feasible, then it's not going to work. We even changed our mission statement. Now it's launching inspired vision to reality. That launching part is it has to work.
right.
And so we've got a lot of battle wounds from doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And we probably hurt a lot of churches for the first 15 years of us figuring this out. But now we've kind of corrected that and figured out how to draw on budget. So it's years of doing it wrong that has taught us how to do it right.
Well,
Thanks for asking. I appreciate that.
no, and as a pastor and as someone who knows what that's like, I mean, it's great to work with people who are also going like, "Hey, we want you to dream, but we want you to dream within the resources you have so we can actually implement something." So I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think when you're in the middle of a project, there's this sense that you have that, gosh, we've got to do this too. If we don't do this too, it's not even worth it.
Yeah.
And you can do that to yourself to death until all of a sudden you've priced yourself out of a project. And that's a problem.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's do this. Let's take a sharp right turn because you wrote an article recently talking about eight trends kind of in church design.
Yeah.
And I think some of them you're going like, oh, we should go after these. Some of them we probably should ignore.
Yeah.
Let's talk about two or three of those key trends in church design in 2024 and beyond that you think are really important. Just give us a couple of those, and
Yeah.
we'll give everybody the link to that article.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I have the link. So it'd be great if somebody dropped it into the article. One of the trends, I think the first one on the list is what I call the magnolification of America. It's Magnolia, the silos in Waco.
Oh
Um,
yeah, my
like
wife has
uh,
been down there and visited Magnolia Farms. Sure.
oh my goodness, yeah. It's like you start to see this as you're driving through neighborhoods. You'll see houses do it, and you're seeing churches do it where they're painting the brick white, and then they're doing the dark trim around the edges. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, are you seeing it in Chicago?
My favorite breakfast place in Naperville is called Buttermilk, and
Yeah,
Buttermilk Cafe has the exact light look. It's the white. What do they call the wood? What do they
yeah,
call it?
yeah. The oh, I
Shiplap.
forget, I forget. What was it again?
Shiplap.
Shiplap,
There
the
it is.
shiplap.
Yes, that's it.
There it is. Yes, the shiplap. So like that trend is really starting to sweep. And when you drive through towns and you start to see churches that used to be brick, you knew they were brick, and now they're white. You're seeing it everywhere. And there are some times when it makes a whole lot of sense to do that. Especially if you inherit a building, whether it's this church just gave you their building and you're trying to update it really, really quickly and inexpensively, or it's a campus that you're launching. Um, there's this is a great. You mind if I show you a quick example?
Go for it.
I'm going to do it real fast. Here's a quick example of what I would call the magnolification of America. Here we go. This is a church in Moreno Valley, Discovery Christian Church. Now, this is their kids' environment. It's
Okay.
California, so everything has
Sure.
outside entrances. But it's definitely, here's another shot. Definitely 1970s vibe, right?
Yeah,
And the nice thing about it is it's not brick, but we're planning a new worship center for these guys. And one of the things we did is we did a rendering of what if you just painted. Like it's simple, right? It's just paint, and we were like, you can do that right away. And this is a shot that they took, so this isn't a professional shot or anything, but they painted it. I mean,
yeah.
it's significantly better. This is
Oh
even
yeah.
like their whole building was this olive green and rust colored, very very appealing to the guest. And then just a quick coat of paint just just changes it. So something as simple like that can transform a space pretty inexpensively. But just so you know, I would really consider before you paint brick that you really know what you're doing. It might even make sense to have it modeled and look at it because that's tough to go backwards from. You can do it, but it's tough.
But I'm also hearing you. It's a pretty inexpensive way to make
Yeah.
things look much better very quick.
Yeah, especially, and this really holds true with buildings that a couple different that are older, or you've got a campus with the kind of campus where you can walk through the decades as you walk the campus. You know,
Yep.
here's the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. We built something in the 90s. Sometimes a quick coat of paint can tie all that together.
All right. So that's one. Give me one or two more.
All right, here's another one. Oh, this is a good one. I'm going to jump down. I'm going to call it the layered lobby effect, extending the lobby beyond the building.
Okay. Yes. Talk to me about it. What does that mean even?
Well, I know that in my experience, like when I go to Walmart, I grab a cart, I do my shopping, and then there's this moment in my entire shopping experience when I say to myself, I'm done shopping, I'm going to check out, right? So when that click happens, I go to the checkout line, I find the shortest one, and I'm standing in line, and right there in the line are those, those where it has the tabloids and the gum rack and
Oh yeah,
the chapstick, and it's the store's last ditch effort to get another buck from you, right?
right. Impulse
Um,
buy.
yeah, and that's exactly impulse buy. I love that, and so I kind of think of that like when you're at the church and you're a guest at the church or you're a regular attendee at the church. You leave service, you pick up your kid, and then there's this moment that happens, the same kind of click where people say, all right, let's go. And maybe it's after they've determined where they're going to go to lunch. I'm not sure, but they're like, okay, let's go. The minute they leave the doors, they're gone. They're done. Like they're just gone. So one strategy is to create, you have your lobby, but then if you can create an amazing outdoor environment outside of your lobby, then not necessarily impulse buys, but maybe we can have some impulse conversations, right? What
Yeah.
if I can slow the walk to the car just a little bit so that there's a few more conversations that happen? And it's not leave the door, go directly to the car. If I can just slow them down a bit long enough to maybe possibly connect with one or two people, then I've made a huge, it turns our environment into a relational environment, not transaction, you know?
And so what things do you have to do with the facility to make that happen? Or by extending the lobby, extending the foyer, extending the
Yeah.
space? What do you have to actually do physically so that it
Yeah.
does create those pauses and those possibilities for connecting and interaction?
Okay, let me do this. Let me show you an example. This is like hyperbole. So I'm showing you the um, all the way full on going for it type example. And then you can kind of back it down to your context. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
This is a church that we worked on in Hendersonville, Tennessee. It's called Long Hollow Baptist Church. And this is the before shot. So there's a couple things to look at here. Over here in this area, you can see there's like that brownish brick. We painted that. You'll see that in a second. But
Did you
then
paint
there's
it
this kind we didn't paint it black. We painted it white though. You'll see.
black?
But this is definitely even. Let's see if I can zoom in. Even if you zoom in here, you can
Uh-huh.
see it's just cold hard edges.
Oh,
When you
yeah.
leave the building, you're literally in the parking lot already. You know. So this is it after it's done. And you can see the painted building that we just
Yeah.
did. We
Nice.
removed the porte-cochere. But when people leave out this space, clearly it slows you a little bit, but not in a bad way. You know, here's another shot of it. This is inside that little park area. Here's that building that we painted. Here's a shot of it painted, and then the entryway. What was interesting about this? You talked to Robbie, who's the pastor. He said before we did this huge park area, I would show up on campus and no one would be there. He says now I show up and there's perpetually 30 to 50 people that I don't even know on our campus.
Yeah.
Which is a game changer. I think I've got one more shot. I mean, look at this. This is what they used to have. This is it now.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing,
So
Dave.
so if you took that again, that's taking it to the nth degree. But if you look outside your doors that most people go out of, is there a way to put some greenscape out, maybe some string lights? What are some things that could be engaging? Is it possible your playground is actually on the opposite side of your building instead of there? It could make sense because that may be where your preschool is, but your kids, the kids of the guest have the greatest opportunity to slow down everybody. Like if they want to go play or can I swing one time?
Sure.
So if you have that in the way, you can get that impulse buy style conversation.
Or why wouldn't you, I mean, on nice days, decide to bring your hospitality, kind of like if you have, if you have coffee or any kind of other service like that, why wouldn't you bring that out there? I mean, it feels like anything,
100%.
or even if there were, sign up booths or information booths, you could also put it out there. Cause I mean, that looks like a row of just like that row of bushes there look like it
Yeah.
was, it just as well been a huge wall that says "Stay away,"
Right.
and all of a sudden it's
Right.
just
Right.
invites you in there. Yeah, look at that.
Right. Yeah. And what was crazy, the first time I came on campus, I parked right about where this photo is. This may have been my photo right when I walked out of my car first time I was on campus. I didn't know where to go in. Like there was no obvious entrance. But when you do this, there is a clear gravitational pull, to where you should go. Now, when you do a layered lobby or do a great outdoor environment, what happens is there is a gravitational pull that direction. And I don't really even care what part of the country you're in. Even in Chicago, when you go to restaurants, sometimes you look for great outdoor environments,
Yeah.
even though you rarely sit there. Like it's like the vibe comes outside and you kind of know what it's about before you even go.
No, that's remarkable. Because I mean, again, if you put your pastor hat back on,
Right.
the thing you want is you're delighted when people show up on a Sunday, but what you really want is you want everybody to take the next step, and that only happens if they connect with another person. And if they
Right.
connect with a person, there's a chance of them getting in a small group. If they connect with another
Hmm.
person, there's a chance of them starting to serve. They connect with another person, it starts to feel like a community and
Yeah.
not just a place where I go to church. And that's what you
Yeah.
want.
Have I mentioned to you about the idea of the length of stay?
Say that again. A what?
The length of stay.
No, let's talk about it.
Um, so our CEO is a former Disney Imagineer, and what's super fun is going to lunch with him because we'll be like eating a burger, and then out of the blue he'll say something like, "Do you know why we built California Adventure?" And I'm like, "No, just tell me why did you build California Adventure?"
Right.
And I remember he said the Disney execs at the time did a study and discovered that the average length of stay for the guests was 0.7 of a day.
Okay.
And they asked the question, what would it take for us to do more than a day? So they literally built this theme park on the parking lot of Disney. It was actually considered the worst theme park ever made. They added some Disney hotels in downtown Disney. And when they opened, they were booking like 1.8 of a day, which, if you're Disney, means you're making a ton of money, right?
Okay.
But if I looked at the average length of stay for the guest on Sunday morning, or even the regular attendees on Sunday morning, and let's assume that the average service was an hour long, but the average length of stay for the guest was an hour and 5 minutes. Like I know a whole lot about that length of stay. I know that maybe they're showing a little bit late. Maybe they're leaving early, picking up their kids, and they're going straight to the parking lot, zero conversations. But if I can extend the length of stay of the guest to an hour and 15 minutes, and not because our checkout process is bad for our kids or our parking situation is bad, but genuinely because they want to engage with the site or what's happening on the facility, then I have exponentially increased the possibility that they're going to connect relationally.
Absolutely.
I remember at the church that I was going to several years ago, after service, they did like this BMX bike racer thing in the parking lot, and I remember leaving the service, going to the parking lot, and standing there and just watching the BMX bikers. It was engaging, but I looked at my watch and I had stayed an hour and 20 minutes, and I was really thinking I was going to go grab lunch right away, but I didn't. And I did actually have more conversations with people because I was just standing around talking.
Sure.
So if we can increase the length of stay, whether it's outdoor experiences or whatever ways we can come up with, we exponentially increase the relational value of a Sunday morning experience.
Which, I mean, and if it's true, and I think it is true, that relationships are the catalyst for spiritual growth, that's exactly what you
Right.
want to that reminds me, I mean, like when we first planted Community Christian Church, so we're meeting at Naperville Central High School in the cafeteria. Okay.
Yeah.
Facility aesthetic wise, terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But we tried to do everything we could to make it as desirable as we possibly could. So we took this large room. We didn't need all the space. And we actually had the first half of this half over here was where we would have our service. But then the other
Yeah.
half, we turned into this whole hospitality area. And it's kind of what you did, extend the lobby. We tried
Yeah.
to, we, we put the food over here away from the doors because we knew that when people left the coffee and food, they would go to the coffee and food, and if they
Yeah.
would get coffee and food, then that'd give us a better chance to talk to them, connect with them. And we also knew that if they had to walk through all this stuff, kind of like it's the same mindset you have when you go through an airport, right? When you
Right.
drive, when you go through an airport, I mean, they have, especially if you're coming from another country. What do they call
The,
the stuff they're trying to sell you?
yeah. I don't know. The kiosks.
Yeah, there's all kinds of kiosks they have you walk through before you ever get to one of the gates. It's the same
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trying to figure out how do we give as many possible relational connections. I think that's the same thing you're talking about
Oh
here.
yeah, like when you're going, especially international, like as you leave TSA, you have to walk through the store in order to get out, that type of thing. The
Thank you,
duty
Mel.
free, the duty
There we
free
go.
shops. Yeah.
Melanie. Thank you. Yes, it's exactly it. Well, I mean, it's similar. All right. Anybody else? If you do have questions, I mean, you have the rare opportunity of Dave right here to talk to him about church facility stuff. Go ahead and drop those in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else on those 8 different trends? You've talked about some that matter. Are there any that we got to ignore, or do you want to touch on another one you think that really matters?
Um, let's see here. They all matter. I wouldn't have included them in the list if they didn't. But one
Okay.
that I think is, if I could hit two really quickly, one
Yeah.
that I think can be a fairly cheap game changer for the church is, let me show this one. We call it "Let There Be Light." What's interesting to
I did read
me,
the article ahead of time. I love this one.
when you read it, what'd you think?
I thought this makes lots of sense. And again, I mean, and again, the pictures the pictures were visually kind of stunning.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I can't tell you how many churches I go to, and at night it's dark at night. Like it really is a little bit of an epidemic. Like churches are not lighting up their buildings at nighttime. And especially how LEDs are happening, like the LED lights now, like lighting is just cheap and easy, and it's a super inexpensive way for you to really give your building pop at night. Like people are driving by your building, so might as well let it pop. So let me show you a couple examples. Here's a building we did at Whittier Area Community Church. Look, the building's great, whatever, but look at the light.
Yeah.
It's like not just the string lights, but there are also some sidewalk walk lights. And if you are walking to your car at nighttime, this provides an extra layer of safety for sure.
Sure.
But if you're driving by it, it's just like visually so appealing. I think my camera
You know
died.
what?
Let me
Hey,
switch.
but Dave, I mean, I know you said not just the string lights, but those string lights, that again, that's something that's really inexpensive that does pop and is
It
interesting and attractive.
it really does. It really does. So I mean, you can go to Costco and buy 4 or 5 boxes of those and hang them, and that changes the game
I
for
mean,
real.
I'm thinking about my patio. My patio is significantly better because I did that.
It's so true. It's so true. Here's another one. Again, just lights, and if you have glass lighting the inside, and some people, the executive pastor types, will think about, well, it costs money to run those lights all night long. But if you've bought the LEDs, the cost to run that all night long is worth the exposure you're going to get from people driving by. This is a super cool one. This is that Long Hollow project again. See those lights in the windows right there? And then we've got lights behind these Corten pieces of steel. Those are color changing.
Oh,
So
that's
when they're
cool.
having an event, it can like dance colors and do all kinds of fun things. And then there are fire pits right there. So it's super engaging for kids and families. And there's no reason you shouldn't be able to do outdoor lighting where you can even change the color for like Christmas or
Oh,
Valentine's
yeah.
Day or whatever else.
And again, relatively inexpensively too.
Mhm. Or if,
All right,
the Cowboys go to the Super Bowl.
we got a couple of questions here. So this first one,
Yeah.
I need you to wear both hats. I want you to go back in the day, your church planner hat. Okay, but then also I want you to wear your design hat too. So
Yeah.
Michael's asking this question. When you're worshiping in a space like a school cafeteria, like Dave shared,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
probably a church planner, excuse me, how can we create a length of stay environment and a welcoming environment in that space? Give us a couple ideas there. You're doing setup and tear down. You're not
Yeah.
in the world's greatest space, but you are wanting to create a welcoming environment, a length of stay environment. What are a couple things maybe to keep in mind?
Yeah. One of the things that if you are in a church planter environment where you're portable, you get really, really good at efficiency. Like you can load and unload faster than the Amish can build a barn. You're super good at it. But I think efficiency can sometimes be the enemy of relationship. And so it might be even helpful to implement a rule if it's at all possible that after service is done, nobody touches anything or tears down anything for 15 minutes. We'll sound an alarm, and we want people to relationally connect. You're human beings, not human doings, right? So I want you to actually connect with one another. And it's possible that you're not going to be able to change the environment to make it engaging like Long Hollow. You're not going to be able to do that. But you can, on a regular basis, plan things to happen right after the service that allow you to engage for a little bit longer. Because there also is this tension. The school wants you out, and you've got a time that you've got to be out. So you're going to wrestle this tension of, I want people to linger a little bit, and yet we got to be out by a certain time. So it's almost like at the restaurant, when you're at the restaurant and they start busting the tables and putting the chairs up on top of the tables and turning out the lights. If you can read the room at all, it's time to go.
Right.
So you've got to make sure that some of that stuff stalls just a little bit. You linger for a little bit before that starts to happen, because when that happens, everybody reads the room and they're like, we gotta go.
I think
That's my
that's
best.
no, I think that's really good because there is a part of you going, okay, we got to get the next thing done. But you're right. As soon
Yeah.
as you start tearing down, that sends a signal to everybody else. We're closing shop, and you guys need to leave.
Yep. Yep.
I remember
Great
this too.
question.
It is a good question. I remember another thing we used to do too is we would intentionally, even though if we like you're stacking chairs and unstacking chairs, but in our like hospitality area, we would always intentionally put chairs to try like at a 90-degree angle, so
Yeah.
that when people would sit, they would actually see other people.
Right. That's good.
And again, try to help them kind of engage with one another. I'd encourage them, be strategic about where, like if you have a coffee service or a tea or any, I would go over the top with hospitality. You know,
Yeah.
if you can, I mean, bring in pastries, bring in donuts. You know, when you're smaller like that, you can afford to do some of those things, make up that way. People will, they'll go that direction.
Right.
And if you, another thing to do, consider this too, is if they go pick up their kids, have a little play area. Buy
Mm,
some cheap, kids equipment kind of stuff that's kind of boxed in a certain part of the area there that's next to where the food is. Because if you can get the parents to drop off their kids in this little play area
yeah.
after they pick them up from your what
Yeah.
we call Kid City, they'll hang out there, and then you can also, and then they'll have a cup of coffee, and then I mean, if they can kind of see their kids and have a cup of coffee, I mean, that's like a treat for them.
Right. Golden. You're golden.
Good question, Michael. Hey, Gladys is asking this too. I think she's just curious. Do you use experience design or service design principles when you start the design, or use any
Uh,
kind of user research to see how they're using the church now and how they want to use the church after the redesign?
that's a great question. We use both principles, service and experience, and because they can serve one another. Um, as far as research on experience in the church, I wish there was a source for that besides hiring a secret shopper.
Mm,
But yeah, I don't know of any sources for that. Do you, David? Dave?
I mean, I know places where we could go, but I don't know anybody that's regularly doing that. I mean,
Right,
I would go,
right.
yeah. If you could afford to hire Barna, I mean, they could come in and do it. If you want to hire Warren Bird, he could come in and do it for you. But
That's
I don't
true.
know places to go. No. Uh-uh.
Good question.
Melanie's got a question. A couple of them. Let's see what she says here. She says a couple questions. Are you guys seeing any upticks or trends in design or requests for dedicated prayer rooms within churches or schools aside from the main sanctuary? Huh. Now this is a Dave Milam question because I don't build any buildings. Are you seeing any?
I don't know that I would say there's an uptick in prayer rooms.
No.
Um,
Okay.
I don't. And sometimes, fair enough. That tends to be denominational driven. So if they're Assemblies of God, if they're Pentecostal, then they're definitely wanting that. I'm not saying the Baptists don't pray, but the Baptists don't ask for that as much, and neither do the non-denoms. So I think for the most part, some of the churches are finding space wherever they can instead of dedicating space. It's very rare that we would dedicate a room for something just like that when other rooms are sitting empty. Square footage is so expensive right now that we want to try to multi-use space as much as we can.
She also then followed up, and it's similar to that. Do you see any trends for design of outdoor contemplative spaces for individuals or families?
Yeah, it's very similar. Like if you have great outdoor environments, then a prayer garden or something like that is um, definitely something you can do. It really tends to be very location driven.
Yeah,
Because if you're in an urban context, it's just not going to work. But if you're in a spot where you've got a lot of land and you can do a prayer walk or something like that, then that's definitely something worth exploring.
that's cool. Thanks for that question, Melanie. Hey, I want to ask you about this too. Kind of the integration of technology and facilities. What kind of things are we seeing there? Anything new that we need to know about?
I don't think it's anything that would surprise you.
Okay.
Obviously, we're going to town on the LED walls all over the place, right? It's like people who get tattoos. I don't have a tattoo, but once you get your first one, you think about the next one. And so they'll put one on stage, and then all of a sudden, someone will say, "We need to put one in the lobby, in the kids' room, and stuff like that." So that's definitely starting to happen. As far as security goes, there are obviously cameras are starting to show up almost everywhere on campus. I even read an article about a year ago where they have this technology that can listen to the room, and if it identifies a gunshot, it can tell you what kind of gunshot it is and immediately alert the authorities there was a gunshot on the campus. Um, so there's that technology as well. Again, and then the colored LEDs lights are just kind of everywhere these days.
Talk a little bit because me and you were just kind of chatting before we jumped on here. That sustainability is also becoming very,
Yeah,
very important. Can you talk a little bit about sustainability and some of the trends for church design, especially um, in this over
yeah,
the last like decade or so?
yeah. What's interesting is back in the 80s and 90s, kind of during the Willow Creek era, every church bought 40 or 50 acres, and then they did a master plan where the 6,000 seater was going to go. You know, and now that we're 2020 something, church leaders are saying, "Listen, we want to do a campus model, or we want to plant churches." And so the biggest venue that we ever will need is 1,500 seats. So that means if they have 40 acres, they really only need 15 acres of buildable land. So
Yeah,
they've got like, I don't do the math well, but 30 or 25 acres that they got to figure out what to do with. So a lot of these churches are having real conversations about how do we develop this property and essentially develop it in a way that the church is the center of the community. Not just we're going to sell it off to a subdivision, and now the church is going to be staring at privacy fences, or we're going to do a strip mall, and now we're going to stare at dumpsters. But how do we integrate these pieces into church life and church culture, and even the length of stay for our guests by doing so? So there is a sustainability model that's really starting to trend that didn't hit the list. That is, we're leveraging resources that we have right now for long-term sustainability beyond the tithe, to so that we can do ministry across the world. That's
And,
what I'm
and,
seeing.
and when you talk about that, I mean, you're talking about this is it's like another revenue stream for the church.
Absolutely, yeah,
I mean, I know at a couple of our facilities, um, I mean, we do huge events a lot on Friday nights and Saturdays that are cultural events for different groups in our community. And they're
yeah,
delighted to use our space. We're delighted to have them in our space, but it also becomes another revenue stream for a community Christian church, which has been super helpful. Um, at one of our locations, we have several gyms, and we actually have a sports complex. Um, we partner with a company that does volleyball tournaments, and that's been a
yeah.
great thing for them. Pickleball has become huge, and it actually
It's really huge.
both our locations. I mean, I had someone in my small group said, "Oh yeah, I'm playing pickleball down at this place down in Plainfield." And I go like, "You mean our other location?" And they were like, "Oh, that's one of our locations." I was like, "Yeah." And I think I think when you come, you pitch in $3, you get to play for an hour or something. I don't know what it is, but but there are a lot of things that churches can do because we have great spaces that we're not always
Yeah,
using 24/7. And I
yeah,
think, if you're working with a guy like Dave and work with a company like Visioneering, and you go like, "Hey, here's what we need. We're gonna need it for this, this, and this, but we'd also love for it to be a great influence in the community. We want this to be a service to the community." You can do that, and at the same time, it can also become a revenue stream, which I think leads to that kind of sustainability you're talking about.
absolutely.
Hey, Dave, thank you very, very much. Hey, I'm going to ask either Sarah or Alana if you would put that article that Dave wrote about 8 church trends. You definitely want to check that out. It's on their website. It's kind of the latest and greatest. And here's what there it is. It's what's 8 trends, the top 8 trends that are happening in 2024. You want to check that out. Um, and anything that we can do, whether it's NewThing and helping reproduce disciples, leaders, churches, networks, and movements, we would love to have you uh, reach out to us. We'd love to help you in any way we can. If it has to do with facilities and church buildings, whether it's something that's starting from scratch or it's a redesign or even something you're doing, wanting to kind of freshen things up, we highly recommend Visioneering, and we are delighted to have Visioneering as a strategic partner. So I want to say thanks for joining us. And Dave, thank you very much for sharing your expertise.
Thanks, my friend.
All right. See you, everybody.
See you.